In a modern society, a manager is a professional communicator. From our research data, we know that managers spend nearly all of their working days communicating. They hold meetings or interviews, read or reports, talk with or listen to other people. Clearly, as managers, we're in the people business. Our success doesn't come from our ability to handle machines and materials. We're rewarded for our ability to handle people, to get people to do what we want them to believe as we want them to believe, and to know what we want them to know. The main tool in working with people is communication. Yet we don't think much about effective communication. Communication is taken for granted as doing what comes naturally. This is understandable, for after all, we've been communicating since before we can remember. When we began to work for a living, we got busy, and we couldn't find much time to think about better communication. When I talk to managers about their communication, their answers suggest that most of them view it as a conveying process. Material needs to be transmitted from where it has been stored to where it is needed. The conveyor simply picks it up at one place, moves it over, and dumps it where it belongs. Isn't communication the same? The manager is full of information and ideas. The subordinate is told what to do and how to do it. We use a memo, a meeting, an order. Given the right information conveyed clearly, the subordinate will know, believe, and do what we want him to. As managers, we deal with technical things such as balance sheets, equipment, other materials. However, we are more concerned with people. We make judgments about people on the basis of what we see. We evaluate their competence, their motivation. In making these judgments about others and ourselves, no two of us ever have exactly the same meaning for what we see. Listen to this.
Hey, Charlie, 5 o'clock is quitting time. What are you doing, bucking for a promotion?
Is it 5 o'clock already? I wanted to get this thing finished.
Oh, that's not for me. When the workday's over, I head for home. See you tomorrow.
See you, Harry.
Who does Charlie think he's kidding? He's trying to beat me out. That's what he's trying to do.
I got so interested in this material, I didn't realize the afternoon was shot. I think I'll finish up before going home.
Clear, isn't it, that Charlie and Harry had different meanings for what Charlie was doing? Oh, and here's the boss, Mr. Oliver. A third man and a third meaning. Some bosses might agree with Harry that Charlie was working late to get ahead, but they'd consider this good, not bad. Other bosses might share Mr. Oliver's meaning.
I'll have to talk to Charlie. This is the third time I've noticed him staying late. He must be having trouble getting his work done.
To the boss, Charlie's working late meant that Charlie was having trouble getting his work done on time. To Frank, Charlie was an eager beaver trying to beat him out for the next promotion. But to Charlie, staying late gave him a chance to dig into something that interested him. One act, 3 men, and 3 different meanings. This situation has all the makings of a communication breakdown at 9 o'clock the next morning. If we're sensitive to them, we can find such examples all around us. Most of them occur because we forget that meanings are in people and not in words, and that people's meanings differ for the same event. Furthermore, we often have different meanings when we use the same words. Let's look at some office incidents that show this. The first 2 incidents involve Virginia, a new girl who obviously wasn't told about the jargon used in this company.
Here, burn this.
Burn it?
Yes, burn it. That's what I said, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
George.
Yes?
This is Harry. I'll have a copy of those specifications for you. I only had one copy with all our corrections on it, so I told Virginia to burn a copy for you.
Okay.
Harry knew what he meant by burn, and Virginia knew what she meant. Here's another one.
Type up this invoice, please.
When do you need it?
As soon as you can get to it.
I've got to drop that rush job and get to this right away.
There's no hurry. She can get to it when she finishes that rush job she's on.
She thought that meanings were in words, and she knew the meanings those words had. Different meanings frequently exist in day-to-day situations in the business world.
Is Mr. Oliver in?
Who's calling, please?
Alan Waldo.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Waldo. Mr. Oliver isn't in now.
Thank you. I'll call again.
Situations like this happen every day, but look at the different meanings.
I asked for his name so that Mr. Oliver could call him back when he comes in.
Oliver doesn't think I'm important enough to talk to.
Jane, this is Mr. Whitehead. Let me talk to Oliver.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Whitehead. Mr. Oliver's in conference and probably will be all afternoon.
A top executive calls. The secretary says her boss is in conference. Meanings?
Mr. Oliver is working hard in a series of important meetings, and Mr. Whitehead should know about it.
Oliver's out on the golf course, and she's covering for him.
And so it goes. Communication is hard and has a good chance of breaking down at all times. Meanings are in people, and you don't mean the same as I do. All we have to do is tell people what we want them to do, and they're supposed to do what they're told. We tell them what we need. We tell them what is expected of them, and they operate accordingly. We tell them and tell them and tell them. But it doesn't always work like that, does it? People don't seem to get what we mean. They don't understand. Sometimes they don't even pay attention. If communication is simply the conveying of ideas and information, why is it that people have such difficulty communicating? For example,
George, all I want to know is what happened. Just tell me what happened.
I've been trying to.
What do you mean you've been trying to? All you've been doing is giving me excuses. I told you what to do. Now, I want to know why you goofed it up.
No, sir. I didn't goof it up. I did just what you told me to do.
No, you didn't. What did I tell you to do?
You told me to go out on the line and find out which machine was causing the trouble and pull it off the line.
I did not. I know what I told you to do. I didn't tell you to pull the machine. I told you to fix it. The front office is screaming its head off at me, pulling a perfectly good piece of equipment off the line when all it needed was a little bit of repairing. You don't yank machinery like that. You fix it.
That's not what you said to do.
Yes, it is. You just botched it up.
Look, Frank, I'm sorry. I did my best to follow your instructions.
Well, maybe your best isn't good enough.
If you told me to fix the machine, I would have. I know my job.
And I know mine.
obviously something went wrong, and it cost the company money. More than that, tension between Frank and George is high and likely to stay that way. What went wrong? What causes this apparent breakdown in communication? Let's ask Frank what happened.
Sure, I can tell you what happened. That guy just doesn't understand plain English. I tell him to get rid of the trouble, he gets rid of the machine instead. The guy's got to be stupid to do something like that. You just can't get good help anymore.
So George is stupid. He can't understand plain English. That's a typical first reaction to communication breakdown. But let's see if Frank has any second thoughts about what happened.
I just don't know. I guess I should have gone out there. But I can't follow up on everything. But if you don't do it yourself, it doesn't get done right. Maybe this job is getting too big for me.
Now the supervisor has doubts about himself. Perhaps he isn't adequate to do everything his job requires. But the chain of reactions to communication breakdown doesn't usually end there either.
No, it's not my fault. He just doesn't give a damn. There's no ambition anymore. There's no pride in doing a job the right way like it was in my day. The attitude around this place stinks.
Those are the three typical reactions to communication breakdown. The other guy's stupid, he just doesn't care, or I'm inadequate. Of course, sometimes those are the right answers. Sometimes people are stupid. Sometimes they just don't care. and some managers are completely inadequate. Communication training can't help those problems, but fortunately, there's usually a better explanation. Let's go back. What did Frank tell George in the first place?
There's trouble on the number 3 line. The foreman seems to think it's the automatic control. I don't know what's causing the trouble, but whatever it is, get out there and get rid of it.
Okay, I'll check and get it out of there.
Seems simple enough. Happens every day. The subordinate doesn't appear to be stupid, and his attitude certainly seems all right. What went wrong? Well, the supervisor's in trouble because he misunderstands the nature of communication. The supervisor thinks that communication is a conveyor, that he can just take information out of his head, send it over to the other person, and dump it in. But it doesn't work that way. Communication is not that simple. In fact, it's extremely difficult to communicate effectively. You don't get meanings across on a conveyor. The words you use, the gestures you make, the things you do, don't have meanings in themselves. Meanings aren't in words. Meanings are in people. We each have our own meanings. We learn them from experience. Since no two people ever have the same experience, no two of us can ever have exactly the same meaning for anything. It reminds me of an English teacher I once had. We were studying Hamlet, and I didn't understand certain of the passages. After poring over the text, I went up and asked her to explain. Her answer was always the same.
It means exactly what it says. How many times have I told you, if you don't understand it, go back and read it again?
The teacher didn't realize that I had to have the meanings, or I wouldn't understand the passages no matter how many times I read them. That remark she made, "I told you," is the first clue to communication illness. Frank has the same problem.
I told you what to do. Now I want to know why you goofed it up.
No, sir. I didn't goof it up. I did just what you told me to do.
No, you didn't. What did I tell you to do?
You told me to go out on the line, find out which machine was causing the trouble, and pull it off the line.
No, I didn't. I know what I told you.
I told you. Frank believed that meanings are in words and relied upon the conveyor system of communication, and he got into trouble. Now, you may be saying to yourself, if this is true, if meanings are in people rather than in words, what have I been doing all my life? I've been doing okay. Well, maybe you have, when the subject is technical. For example, when I first came into this film studio, I didn't have the same meanings everyone here had. I heard people using terms like pan and dolly. I thought at first I knew what they were talking about, since I had meanings for a pan or a dolly. People in the industry understand each other, but an outsider is lost. After several rehearsals, I learned that a dolly refers to a stand on which the camera is mounted to provide forward and backward movement. I also learned what they meant by the term pan. The camera moves right or left. This kind of panoramic movement is used to follow some particular action. Much of the training you give a new employee on the job should involve teaching him the jargon of the organization. But now let's go back to the trouble between Frank and George. While we watch it, let's look for principles of communication that we can use on our own jobs.
You don't yank machinery like that, you fix it.
That's not what you said to do.
Yes, it is. You just botched it up.
Look, Frank, I'm sorry. I did my best to follow your instructions.
Well, maybe your best isn't good enough.
If you'd told me to fix the machine, I would have fixed it. I know my job.
And I know mine.
What a mess. Well, that's one we booted. And now, wait a minute. I can't let it stop there. If I don't get this straightened out, we'll both be in trouble later. George is not stupid, and he tries to do a good job. I don't know what went wrong, but I'd better get it straightened out between us.
George, come back a minute, will you?
Yes, sir.
There's one important point. No matter how good we are at communication, we'll still miss once in a while. When breakdown does occur, we can't ignore it or forget it, or we'll be in more trouble the next time.
George, I shouldn't have blown up like that. I'm sorry.
Same here. Look, Frank, I try to do the best job I can for you.
I know you do.
I thought you were saying I was stupid, and it made me mad.
For a minute, I did think you were stupid. Then I realized I was blaming you instead of myself. Actually, nobody's to blame, I guess. But we sure did get things fouled up. I don't understand. I thought my instructions were clear as a bell.
Well, they were clear to me.
Yeah, they were clear to both of us. But we meant totally different things. I'd like to find out what went wrong. What did you hear me tell you?
Well, you said, or at least I heard, that I was to go out and get rid of whatever was causing the trouble on the number 3 line.
That's what I meant for you to do. But not get rid of the control unit.
That's what was causing the trouble.
Yes, but... Now, wait a minute. We're about to start shouting again.
Yeah.
It's just that I never dreamed you'd... Why, we all got chewed out last week for writing off too much salvageable equipment. Hey, wait a minute. I didn't tell you that, did I?
No, sir.
Well, I'll be. Well, live and learn. Well, there's nothing we can do about this one, George, but maybe we've both learned a lesson. It was clear to me. It was clear to you. But you didn't mean what I meant.
What's clear to you is clear to you. If the supervisor learned that lesson well, it might be worth all the trouble it caused. He did learn one important point. It usually doesn't help to view communication breakdown as somebody's fault. That's just the way the world is. The effective manager gets rid of the notions of blame and fault. It doesn't help to ask who was responsible. Actually, if you continually attach blame to misunderstanding, the misunderstandings get worse, not better, because people are afraid to admit they don't understand, and they start defending themselves. Well, the supervisor understands the trouble he was in, and he learns something about how to prevent it the next time. The fact is, however, that there still was a management breakdown this time, and it could have been prevented in the first place. The supervisor was operating under the conveyor theory of communication. He told George what to do, and that was that. He assumed that George would mean what he meant. Under that assumption, all that he could do was find out about his problem after it was too late. What if Frank had understood that you don't send meanings on a conveyor? What if he had assumed that George wouldn't mean what he meant? Then he would have found out what George meant before the damage was done. Couldn't the problem have been avoided in the first place? Like this.
There's trouble on the number 3 line. The foreman seems to think it's the automatic control. I don't know what's causing the trouble, but whatever it is, get out there and get rid of it.
Okay, I'll check and get it out of there.
Oh, George, you sure you understand?
Yeah, I'm sure.
No, don't ask him if he understands. All the pressure is on him to say yes, whether he understands or not. Ask him what he understands. Now try it again.
George, this is important. Now let's check and make sure we're on the same wavelength. What are you going to do?
I'm going out and check the line. If I find the problem's coming from the automatic control, I'm going to pull it off and replace it.
No, George, that's not what I said.
Yes, it is.
Wait a minute. Don't start an argument over what was really said. That's not important. What's important is that he gets the right message. Try it once more.
I'm going to pull it off the line and replace it.
That's not what I mean to say. Don't pull the control unless absolutely necessary. There's a squeeze on about excessive salvage. Try to fix it if at all possible.
I think I've got you now. Find the trouble. Fix the control if possible. If it takes too much or too long to fix it, pull it off and replace it. Okay?
Okay. But before you pull it, check with me.
All right, Frank.
Well, that's much better, isn't it? It took an extra 30 seconds, but it was well worth it. Frank still has a good deal to learn about better communication. But so do all of us. No matter how hard you try, misunderstandings will occur, but at least your batting average goes up. When somebody does goof, remember that it doesn't help to place blame, even on yourself. It isn't anybody's fault. The thing to do is to correct the situation. The manager's job is to create a climate in which people will feel free to take a look at what causes communication problems. And they don't do that if they feel somebody is going to lower the boom on them afterward. Most importantly, we need to remember that the conveyor theory of communication isn't right. Things don't work that way. Meanings aren't found in the words we use. They're found in the people who use them. Meanings come from experience. Our experiences differ, so our meanings differ. Meanings are your own view of the world. What's real to you is real to you.